Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today, I'm going to help you deal more effectively with your lawyer. So let's talk about that down at the beach. Now, it is said that a lawyer's time is his stock in trade. And indeed, that's what many lawyers use to bill. They use the amount of time that it takes them to work on your matter. And based on that amount of time, well, that's how much you have to pay. So that's not always the case with contingent fee lawyers because contingent fee lawyers tend to take a fee based on the amount of money that's recovered. But generally speaking, attorneys tend to try to guard their time as much as possible. And there are several reasons for this. One, we would just like to have a life. We would like to be able to go home at 5:30, 6 o'clock and not worry about all of the other things that are pending. And we can't do that if we wind up spending large amounts of time answering what we call the 5 o'clock train questions, because a lot of the questions that we get fall into the category of what time does the 5 o'clock train leave, or who's buried in Grant's tomb, that sort of thing. So I think it's important to understand how the most effective way to work with your lawyer is. And that is before you sit down to call a lawyer or talk to someone at a law office about a problem, that you're very clear and very specific about the problem that you have. Here's a helpful way to think of it. First of all, you have to identify the problem, so tell us what you need help with. Was it a car accident? Is it a contract issue? Is it an employment issue? Maybe you have a will that you need drafted or you want to do a trust. Whatever that key issue is, write it down. If there is a problem, who or what caused the problem? Was it the other driver running the red light? Are you afraid that you're going to be cheated on the contract? Were you fired from your job because of your race or religion or some other protected status? What caused the problem? And then finally, who is at fault? The other driver or the employer or somebody else? Maybe somebody started a rumor about you at work. Whatever the issue is, define what the problem is first. This is the best way to get the lawyer's attention with your problem. Let's assume that you've been in a car accident. You were sitting at a stoplight and someone rear-ended you because they were looking at their cell phone. The lawyer does not need to know where you were going. He doesn't really care if you were going to visit your sick mama at the hospital or if you were running out to the Barnes and Noble bookstore to pick up a copy of the Bible. He doesn't care. What he needs to know is what happened. I was sitting at the red light. I was hit from behind. I suffered an injury to my neck. I'm still having pain that radiates down into my shoulders and into my arms. The doctor thinks that this might get better, with therapy, but I don't have a lot of money for therapy. How can you help me? And of course, the lawyer at that point understands what the problem is and can deal with it. But a lot of times, what we get when we get on a phone call is not that kind of talk. What we get is, we'll say, "Can we help you?" Well, yeah, I've got a problem and I need some legal advice. Okay, what kind of problem do you have? Well, I have a cousin named George. Okay, what did George do to you? Nothing. That's not the point. I have a cousin named George, and I was getting ready to go visit him in Virginia, but I needed to have a good car to do that, and so I went down to the Ford Motor Company and I bought a little Ford Fiesta, and I had and then I was involved in an accident. And well, wait a minute, stop. Is this about the accident or about the car? Well, it's really kind of about both because the accident really messed up the car. Okay. Tell me about the accident. Instead of going in and saying, I was in an accident and I was hurt and I need some help, what people tend to do is they tend to start back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and move forward to today. And that is usually the least effective way of getting the information to the lawyer. The most effective way to deal with the lawyer is to tell them what the problem is first. I my wife has just kind of gone crazy. I need to get a divorce. Okay, we can help you with that. I need to employ somebody to build my barn, and I want to have a contract that protects me. Okay, we can write that for you. But if you need to have somebody to build your barn, we don't need to know why you need a barn built. The only thing we need to know is what kind of issues do you want to be protected against. If somebody comes and says, I'm buying a house and I need a lawyer to handle my house or my closing transaction, okay, that's fine. We can handle that. But we don't need to know that the reason that you're buying the house is because you want to move into our community from Poughkeepsie, New York. It's not, that's not the key part that is important to the lawyer. What's important is what's the problem? Why do you need our help? All right, now that I know the problem, let me ask a few questions. In what way has your wife been going crazy? Have you been threatened physically? Have you been threatened financially? Has she taken all the money out of the savings account? What kinds of issues are you having? Those are the kinds of things that lawyers need to know. Now, if they need additional background, they can certainly ask for it, and many times they will. But the tighter you focus your request for help on what the key issue is, the better the result will be, and the lawyer will be so much happier helping you because he doesn't have to sift through a lot of extraneous facts in order to get to the key facts. One of the things that sometimes happens, though, is that there is not one key fact, or somebody really doesn't know what the situation is. They may not know whether or not they have a problem. They may want to know whether they do have a problem. Now, you're probably thinking, how can someone not know they have a problem? Let me explain. It is very common for someone to come in and say, I think my doctor made a huge mistake when he was treating me, and I think I need to find out what the situation is. Several years ago, I was involved in a case out of Kay County, Oklahoma. A small 2-year-old child was given a salt poor solution of IV fluid and given way too much of it, and she developed hyponatremia as a result of that. Hyponatremia is a condition called of low blood sodium. In other words, the sodium level in the body drops way down. And what happens when that happens is your brain swells. And sometimes when the brain swells, there is a little hole at the base of your skull where the brain stem passes through to your spinal cord, and it will push the brain stem down into that hole and rupture the brain stem, which will usually result in death. And indeed, that's what happened to this small child. And when the parents came to us, they knew that the doctor had not been forthright with them about what the cause of death was, and they wanted to know if there was something perhaps that had gone wrong, something that the doctor was covering up. As it turned out, the doctor made a few mistakes, but he did not make the principal mistakes. He was essentially covering for the hospital. And it took an investigation into the medical records to figure out exactly what caused the problem. And so many times people will call up and say, I think I've been malpracticed upon, or, I think I may have been cheated in this transaction, and it's up to the lawyer to figure that out. What you want to try to avoid when dealing with a lawyer is a shaggy dog story, where you fill in all kinds of extraneous information that the lawyer doesn't need. And as a result, it makes it very difficult for the lawyer to take notes and stay on task. particularly if you throw in anecdotes. And what is very helpful, however, is before you go see a lawyer about something like this, you prepare a chronology. In other words, I went to the hospital on a Monday, and on Tuesday they did my cardiac stent. And then on Wednesday I developed some kind of bleeding. And then on Thursday my leg went numb because it wasn't getting enough blood because they had screwed up how they put the plug into my artery and anything like that that effectively gives the lawyer an understanding of how things happened, where the issues may have developed. It helps him focus his analysis on the medical records and on the charting. So anything you can do to make your lawyer more efficient ultimately helps you. And it's very helpful if you bring in lots of documentation, all the documentation you have. That's particularly true if there's a transaction at issue, right? You were cheated in a business deal. It's really helpful for you to bring in all of the documents. It's really helpful if you were in the hospital and you had problems. If people came to see you, those are people who can testify about what you look like, how you felt, what was going on with you, that sort of thing. A list of witnesses is always helpful, especially if you're in a car accident. I was in a car accident. My buddy was in the seat next to me, and there were 3 people on the corner that after the accident came over and said, "Wow, that car ran the red light." And all that kind of thing is very, very helpful in preparing the case for the lawyer. So giving him good information is helpful, but the most important thing is to get to the point up front so that he knows what kind of a problem you're going to be dealing with and he can help you more efficiently that way. Now, a lot of times lawyers will ask questions that are personal and sometimes difficult to answer, maybe because you're ashamed of something. Have you ever been arrested? You don't want to lie to your lawyer because your lawyer needs to know. As we say all the time, I can explain the truth. I can't explain a lie. So if you lie to me and I unknowingly lie to the other side or to the court, it destroys my credibility and it destroys your credibility. So I need to know as your lawyer up front everything, including the bad things. For example, 10 years ago you got busted for marijuana. Who cares? You can buy it pretty much anywhere in the country now if you've got one of those little cards. So, again, not a huge deal. And it doesn't seem to have the same social stigma that it used to. But if you have been arrested, if you've been convicted of a crime, you need to disclose that. It isn't always going to come into evidence at trial. In the federal rules, if the conviction is older than 10 years, in many cases it will not come in. It's in the federal rules of evidence. In some states, it will always come in if you take the stand. In other words, just the fact that you have been convicted of something. Let's suppose that you wrote a bad check, and it was 20 years ago when you wrote a bad check. If you take the stand, the lawyer on the other side is very likely to bring up that conviction. He'll do it at the end of the examination, at the end of your cross-examination, because he wants to try to get your cooperation at the beginning, but at the end he's not going to care. So he'll say, well, you were convicted of writing a bad check, which is essentially check fraud. You know that, right? So I understand that you may not want to have to go through that, but basically you hold your head up high and say, yes, and I learned my lesson and I have never done that since. Doesn't make you a bad person. Everybody makes mistakes. That's why they put erasers on the end of pencils. And so you shouldn't worry about that. Do you think that in a jury of 12 people, somebody else hasn't had a similar financial problem? Pretty unrealistic to think that. I think everybody's had a problem like that. So, again, what you have to do in those situations is be honest. Don't beat around the bush. Oh, well, yeah, I think I may have had a problem once. No, no, no. Either you have or you haven't. It's binary. It's A or B. It's not one of many. If you've had a problem, tell me what the problem is. Don't beat around the bush and be honest. Honesty is the most important thing you can be with your lawyer. So, the key things here, the key takeaways: 1, get to the point, tell us what the problem is. 2, answer our questions fully and completely. 3, don't lie. Don't beat around the bush. Don't lie. And 4, tell us what you need. Tell us how we can help you. And get to the point on all of those things as quickly as you can. If we need history, we'll ask for it. Otherwise, just stick to the problem. Hopefully you'll find that helpful. If you have any questions about this, please leave them in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, you know all the stuff we ask you to do. Thank you so much for watching, and have a marvelous day. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.